Coming up on Philosophy Talk.
One definition of a totalitarian system is that even when you follow the rules, you're at risk.
How do we find the right balance between liberty, security, freedom, and safety?
If you feel very secure, you're more likely to say, get the government off my back. If you're feeling very insecure, you're saying, I want the government to protect me and get it on my case. And so there's a trade-off going on there between how secure you feel from threats of various kinds and how much power you're willing to give the government.
Our guest is Stephen Holmes from the NYU Law School.
I think the one primary liberty in our system is the right to inspect our government and to ask it to explain its actions.
Liberty versus security.
Coming up on Philosophy Talk after the news.
Philosophy Talk needs you.
Show your support for Philosophy Talk by becoming a partner in our online community of thinkers.
Your tax-deductible donations help us stay on the air.
And the community needs more thinkers like you.
Learn more at our website, philosophytalk.org.
Welcome to Philosophy Talk, the program that questions everything.
Except your intelligence. I'm John Perry.
And I'm Ken Taylor. We're coming to you from the studios of 91.7 KALW, local and innovative public radio for San Francisco.
Continuing conversations that began at Philosopher's Corner on the Stanford campus.
And from there, we migrate to the air via the signals of this lovely station, and from the air to the internet via our blog, theblog.philosophytalk.org, and you can also download podcast of our program as well, and soon you'll be able to download the complete Philosophy Talk corpus via podcast.
Wow, people will have the liberty to download the complete Philosophy Talk corpus.
And they'll be able to listen to it in the security of their own home.
Absolutely. So liberty and security. Why is liberty versus security? What are your thoughts on that, Ken?
Well, the versus is an interesting thing because, you know, if you think about it, what's liberty without security? What does that mean? I mean, I'm free to express my own opinion, to associate, but if around every corner there lurks danger, the expression of that liberty, the exercise of that liberty means nothing. So liberty and security seem to me complementary.
Well, I think that's right, that liberty presupposes security, and security, I suppose, presupposes liberty because you've got to have the liberty to do something or you want to have security. But I think with both of them, it's good to ask two questions. Liberty to do what? And liberty from interference from whom? Right. With our Bill of Rights, it's usually liberty to do something like express your opinion, worship the God you want, and it's freedom from interference from the government. With security, it's usually security to do something like walk to the store or have a conversation with your mistress
or whatever
without anybody finding out.
Or a phone call.
Yeah. Right. And it's not just government interference, it's interference from terrorists, thugs, so forth and so on. So I think when you have the right mix of answers to these two questions, there can be conflicts.
Well, that's certainly true. I mean, and the conflict can be deep because, you know, you think of the government as supposedly safeguarding liberty, right? It's liberty from the government, but it's from government interference or surveillance or mistreatment. But you also think the government is sworn to protect those liberties. Now, the means that it uses, and it's also the government is sworn to secure you, right, from external threats and internal insurrection. But sometimes I suppose the means that the government uses to protect you from external threats or internal insurrection might involve the curtailment of liberty. Now, you can't be from surveillance. You can't be free from surveillance, right, or something, or search, if we're going to protect you.
Well, if you look at, say, the Bill of Rights and the liberties it guarantees, you realize, if you think about it, although we're all raised to value those liberties, they really only apply to a few people who care about those things. How many people care about their political opinions or publishing things or worshiping one God rather than the other? A lot of important people, but not that many. So when the issue of security versus liberty is given to the masses, what's going to happen?
I don't know, John. That's a good question. Now, let's put it to the test. And our roving philosophical reporter, Polly Stryker, did that. She went out and talked to some people about how much liberty they trade for what kind of security. She files this report.
In this post-9/11 world, I asked people what liberties they'd be willing to compromise in return for greater security. Would they share their bank account or cell phone records? Their email? How about their travel plans? How much is okay and what would cross the line for them?
I think anytime when my personal information becomes accessible, then the line's crossed. I mean, I understand like checking bags when getting on an airplane, but I don't understand how my travel plans would keep anyone else safer. Anytime personal information like that gets out, I think it's crossing the line.
I wouldn't want them to read my email, I don't think, because I want my privacy. And I don't really want them to check my voicemail or look at my cell phone records or anything.
If it was for my safety and they thought I was like a terrorist or something, then I guess I'd let them, because I don't want to get blown up. But I wouldn't want them to be going through my emails unless there's like a necessary reason.
We came from Florida, flew here. It was, I don't have a problem with what they're doing as far as the searching the bags, as far as the bank accounts and like searching your homes and stuff like that. That's pushing a little bit too far.
I'm French. I think it would be too much if my government would check out my bank account, my cell phone calls. I mean, that's private. The compromise between the security and freedom is pretty difficult to find.
Well, I guess I would be willing to give up some rights, but not a whole lot. I think it doesn't give too much security if the government can look into everything. We have more freedom in Germany than people do here. But the government is talking about taking measures like having more security, having more camera observation in the cities and public places, because there were bombings.
I wouldn't trade anything. I think we have enough security right now. I think Big Brother's watching too much. I just think they ought to kick all the aliens out and, kick everybody out that's not supposed to be here.
I don't think there's any way you can ensure your safety. I mean, if they can shoot a president with all those guards around them, how much security is there for us?
I don't think it's an either-or proposition. I think you can have security and civil liberties. And I think that the notion of civil liberties can vary as circumstances vary. The more intensive scrutiny that we face at airports is an acceptable imposition that I recognize. The fact that telephone records are scrubbed by the NSA doesn't faze me in the slightest. I look to this government to exercise appropriate public policy choices at the behest of the American people in order to enhance our security.
Right now, somebody is listening to you.
For Philosophy Talk, I'm Polly Stryker.
What a prize to pay.
Thanks to Polly Stryker and to a little bit of the Rolling Stones there for that interesting report from the streets. I'm John Perry, and with me is Ken Taylor.
And we're joined by Stephen Holmes. He's the research director at the Center on Law and Security at the NYU School of Law. He's co-author of The Cost of Rights, Why Liberty Depends on, get this, Taxes. Stephen, welcome to Philosophy Talk.
Hi.
Hi, Stephen. John Perry here. Let me ask you a real basic question. In American mythology, liberty is really important. Our Marines have defended it from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli. The Bill of Rights is the secure foundation of our liberties. Isn't liberty an absolute value that we shouldn't give up for any amount of security?
Well, are you sure that the Marines were defending only liberty rather than security, too? I think the discussion both of you have had, and even the interviews, too, were excellent introductions to the complex intertwining of these two values. Because, as many of these people said, we don't want to. What do we not want to give up? They'll say, I don't want to give up a liberty. But if you think about it for a second, the thing they're giving up is also a security. The liberty, my liberty to own a piece of property and use it, depends on the fact that I feel secure that I'm going to have it tomorrow,
right,
that someone's not going to take it away from me. So, and I think the freedom to speak, as I think one of you said, if when I speak I lose my job, then I don't really have that liberty. So I think the conceptual point here, the strong one, is that these concepts are very much intertwined and that the opposition between them is somehow overdrawn. It's pointing to a reality, but it's probably a reality of the conflict between a liberty and a liberty, or a security and a security. And I don't think we should get that hung up on that polarity, which is somewhat false.
Let me.
At least what I'm hearing from listening to these comments.
I take your point. I take your point in a way, but let's just. I just want to press this just a little bit to get clearer. I mean, I suppose that if you lived in Hitler's Nazi Germany or Saddam's Iraq or the Stalinist Soviet Union, if you kept your mouth shut, you were pretty secure. Right. I mean, if you kept your mouth shut, if you didn't,
I think the
Okay. So I mean,
one definition of a totalitarian system is that even when you follow the rules, you're at risk. So that isn't necessarily true. The police can come in the middle of the night for you had been present at a party where someone made a joke and Saddam shot people for doing that, and that isn't just losing your liberty. That is, of course, obviously losing your security. And when we say, Padilla was placed in custody for 3 years without a lawyer, he didn't just lose his liberty. He was in utter insecurity. He was never told what the charges were. He had no idea what was coming next. So I think the intertwining and the need for all of us, when we're feeling free, we do feel secure.
Right.
When we feel insecure, our liberty is, the liberty to be mugged, or the liberty to have the police take away our property without a warrant, or so forth.
Okay, I take your point. I mean, and I agree, and that's the point I was making near the top of the show, that I think liberty and security are kind of conceptually intertwined, because liberty without security, what is that, right? And I agree with you, the way you put it, that a liberty is a kind of security, right? An exercise liberty is a kind of security. But what are we talking about when we're talking about, there must be something we're getting at when we're talking about this conflict.
Well, one way to think about it is if you define liberty as simply freedom from being interfered with by the government, then it's clear that under conditions of terrible insecurity, say a plague, contagious disease, or a crime spree, or a foreign invasion, under those conditions, people are willing to give the government more power than they ordinarily would. And so there's a trade-off going on there between how secure you feel from threats of various kinds and how much power you're willing to give the government. If you feel very secure, you're more likely to say, get the government off my back. If you're feeling very insecure, you're saying, I want the government to protect me and get it on my case.
But even
so I think that's one way to think about it.
But even if you give the government power, say you give the executive additional powers, I mean, if you give that power with oversight and with a check, I mean, is that really... I mean, if the president can exercise power but subject to a check by Congress and a vote of the people,
that's a very good point. But I think let's explore a little bit more the different kinds of liberties that are restricted under threats of, say, foreign invasion or terrorism. For example, not just civil liberties, due process of law, the right to have a lawyer, the right not to be tortured, all those things, which you would certainly be part of what we mean by liberty. But say freedom of the press. Does freedom of the press extend to reporting on San Francisco's plans for managing a bioterrorist attack? Because if you publicize that on the radio, then someone planning a bioterrorist attack would learn how to get around the defenses. So that would be a case where freedom to publicize, would come up against a public interest in preserving secrecy for a, say, counterterrorist strategy.
That's the kind of thing that is exercised most intellectuals. It's and it's the question. Say the New York Times revealing that the administration is listening into all of our phone calls, and there was a tremendous outcry. They should be punished. They shouldn't be punished. It was okay for them to do because everybody knew it anyway. You didn't hear that though from many of Polly's interviewees. That didn't seem to be their big worry. Was freedom of the press.
Think people are so used to the fact it's technology that has destroyed our privacy. It's digitalization. The fact, we get telephone calls every night from companies who know things about us. So I think it's the reduction of privacy through digitalization and so forth. That's a whole separate trend that isn't caused by the invasiveness of government. And by now, I think people aren't that exercised by the fact that somebody's listening. They're not exercised by the fact that the New York Times revealed it, nor are they exercised that much by the fact that people are listening, because it's almost an expectation.
You're listening to
more.
You're listening to Philosophy Talk. Our subject today is liberty versus security. Our guest is Stephen Holmes from the NYU School of Law.
We've been talking about the value of liberty and the value of security. In our next segment, we'll ask how to maintain a balance between them when they conflict. You can join in by calling 415-841-4134. That's 415-841-4134. Your calls will be monitored by our staff, the government, the UN, and God knows who else.
Striking the balance between liberty and security, plus your calls and emails monitored when Philosophy Talk continues.
Jack Berry Realtors is proud to support Philosophy Talk. JackBerryRealtors.com, 415-564-0225. Real estate services for your business or home since 1969.
Find the cost of freedom buried in the ground. Mother Earth will swallow you. Lay your body down. Find the cost of freedom buried in the ground. Mother Earth will swallow you. Lay your body down.
Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young. Find the cost of freedom. This is Philosophy Talk, and I'm John Perry.
And I'm Ken Taylor. Our topic today, liberty versus security. Which liberties would you give up in order to enhance our security? And which liberties do you think shouldn't be curtailed, even if it means being less secure? Tell us your thoughts.
The number is 415-841-4134. That's 415-841-4134. You can also email us at comments@philosophytalk.org.
Our guest is Stephen Holmes from the NYU School of Law. Stephen, you mentioned an example. San Francisco's bioterrorism program, should it be published in the newspaper, right? It seems to me the answer is, well, no, of course not. Oh. So I wonder something. I mean, it seems some people might think, well, it's obvious how we should do this. I mean, anything that alerts your enemies, you should curtail your freedom. I mean, so there's no real hard principle here. I mean, am I wrong about that? That the principle isn't hard?
What about how many police microphones do you want to place in mosques and churches? Mosques in this case. So we have a principle of separation of church and state. That's part of what our conception of freedom is. But it turns out that principle is viewed by counterterrorism officials as severely handicapping their ability to keep track of things. So I think that would be one that people might worry about and feel uncomfortable with, even though, well, I don't know how you feel about it. I think that's definitely a pretty clear example. Can I just give you another example, which I think might be interesting for your listeners? If this has to do with private property. If I own a chlorine depository, I'm the owner. It's my property. Bush says it's your property. You should do with it what you want. If that depository was hit by some kind of weapon, it could kill maybe 1 million people in the vicinity. So do I have a private freedom, a right to vet my own security guards? And my answer to that is you don't. That's a public trust. That's a public bad that you're sitting on. And there is a need for the government to interfere there and make sure that facility, even though it's privately owned, is guarded by people who don't have criminal records and so on. So I think that's a pretty good example of a case where a liberty, my freedom to do what I want with my property, has to be sacrificed for a community security. I like that example because it's not about civil liberties. It's about capitalist liberties.
Yeah, but let me go back to civil liberties for just a second. Your example of the mosque and Kent's principle that you shouldn't disclose what will aid the enemies. But one of our problems here is who's the enemy? The government seems to me has some right, and this I think the Senate should have insisted on way back when, to say who the enemy is. First it was Al-Qaeda, then it became terrorism, and most recently it's Islamic fascism. Well, if it's Islamic fascism, maybe at least in the fascist mosques, it makes sense to have these recorders. But if you don't know who the enemy is, the curtailment of liberties becomes often open-ended, awful open-ended.
I could not agree more. I think the one primary liberty in our system is the right to inspect our government and to ask it to explain its actions. And this includes the right to ask it to explain its threat assessment. What is its understanding of the threat environment? What is its understanding of the enemy? If it's asking us to make sacrifices of, say, our liberties and confront this enemy, then it has to tell us what it's doing. And definitely a system that doesn't force the government to give reasons for its actions is going to lead to a government that in the end stops having reasons for its actions.
Stephen,
I think that's what we have today.
I think that's a deep point, and I want to explore it with you a little bit more. But I want to go back to your short list of examples, and I'm sure you can multiply them. And I'm wondering whether we just have to do this, and your last remark makes me wonder too, whether we just have to do this on a case-by-case basis. Here's a case, see how you feel about it. Here's a case, see how you feel about it. Here's a case, or is there some principle that is there some general principle that we can appeal to? I mean, if we take liberties to be fundamental, what are the kinds of things that would say, sacrifice this much of it? Are there some general principles?
I think the implication of our earlier conversation, which was that liberty and security are intertwined, that what we're being asked to do is give up some basket of liberties and securities for another pattern of liberty and security. Once you say that, then you get rid of the absolutist language. Liberty is inviolable. I have it. There's nothing I will never give it away. That it makes it much more pragmatic. Makes the question much more pragmatic and a question of judgment, and all the more reason that these judgments should be tested in some kind of adversarial process, because we want to see, and I can always claim, if I'm the police, I can claim that I have to ignore your interests or your liberties or your security for that matter in order to catch a terrorist, let's say. But there has to be some forum in which my claim is tested.
Right. So
you
think
can't just believe what I'm saying.
If there's no sort of once and for all principle, but you think there's a kind of procedural kind of safeguard that we don't get carried away.
I think our system is one in which the use of force, the factual premises for the use of force must always be tested in an adversarial process. And the problem with the war on terror is that it's created a system where the government is saying, we have factual premises for using force, but we're not going to tell you. You have no right to know. It's dangerous. It will help our enemies if you know. So we're going to be able to act in whatever way we do, including reducing your liberties or going to war in some country or another. And you have no right to ask us. You can't ask us.
You're listening.
And that is not likely to make a government more intelligent. An uncriticized government, an uninspected government, is not a competent government.
You're listening to Philosophy Talk. We're talking about liberty versus security. We want to know what you think about how to manage this trade-off. You can join our discussion by calling 415-841-4134. That's 415-841-4134. And Leonard in San Francisco's on the line. Welcome to Philosophy Talk, Leonard.
Yeah, I just want to quote Benjamin Franklin. He who will trade his liberty for security deserves neither.
Leonard, we had that quote. And, Benjamin Franklin didn't actually say that, although it's widely attributed to him.
I think Benjamin Franklin said the coldest winter I ever spent was summer in San Francisco.
No, that was Mark Twain.
Which was extremely wise of him. But I think it was Mark Twain who didn't say that.
So, Leonard, are you hewing a...
by giving up your liberty. All you've done is give up your liberty, usually which is not given back to you. As the one gentleman said, they tend to stay open-ended and not want to give it back to you other than when you pay the price in blood. I don't wish to do that again in this country. I'm a free man. I wish to stay that way. I don't understand how curtailing my right of freedom of speech or assembly will make me safer from a group that has no respect for law to begin with.
But how do you feel about being searched before you go on an airplane? Are you really object to that?
What's that?
How do you? He said, "How do you feel about being searched before you go on an airplane? Do you object to that?"
I do not like that.
We lost Leonard?
No, he's still
I
there.
do not like that.
So, Stephen, what do you think? What do you want to say to Leonard? He's kind of an absolutist here.
Okay, so let's take Second Amendment absolutism. Do you, Leonard, think that you have a right to own biological weapons because you have a right to bear arms? What about nuclear weapons? Why aren't you free to own a nuclear weapon? That's a freedom. It's an arm. Do you have the right to bear arms to that point?
Leonard, are you there?
Yeah, I'm there. You're extending the premise a little far. First off, building a nuclear weapon takes assets way beyond the common man ever having.
Okay, how about cyanide?
Cyanide? Yeah, farmers had it. Farmers had it for years. No one controlled it. So,
yeah.
I mean, and how
about anthrax?
Situational ethics.
How about anthrax? Excellent.
Case by case. Situational ethics can lead to genocide.
Well, I think Leonard has a point, but I think we have to balance it by if you try to have some abstract principles that you stick to through thick and thin, it usually doesn't work out very well. I think the adversarial system that America has hit on is one of the good things about America, as Professor Holmes was saying. You don't have to decide in advance, and you don't have to give up deciding. You just make sure that when the decision comes, there's lots of give and take. And, of course, I think our Senate really failed us in that case, in the present instance.
Leonard, thanks for the call. We've got another caller in the line, Wesley in Berkeley. Welcome to Philosophy Talk, Wesley.
Oh, thank you very much. I just wanted to address something that Professor Holmes noted, which is that there are situations where liberties are taken and then maybe not accounted for. And if the government makes a change and says we have no right to know what that is, I just wanted to say that it sounds really reasonable to me to say that anytime there's an increase in authority, which takes away some liberty, there should be some specifically stated accountability process that we can examine that with. So if they're vaguely saying that well, look at your example, the bioterrorism plan, perhaps they're going to do some things in there that aren't necessary to know in advance, but there may be liberties that we lose that we'd like some accountability for, at least afterwards, some process in place that we can follow up if things are overstepped.
Wesley, nice comment. Stephen, you have any...
Yeah, I like that very much, and I think it can be more or less open. There can be congressional oversight. There can be special courts if they had more teeth. What the essential thing is that the government, when it is forced to give reasons for its trespassing on liberties, it does so in front of a body that has the capacity to push back and that is not dependent upon it. That is not the members of that panel couldn't lose their job because of the executive branch. So I think forcing them to give reasons is in everyone's interest. It's even in the government's interest because it will improve its own performance.
Well, I want to make
I like that.
I want to make a point in connection with that. Being old enough to have lived through this twice, the Vietnam War and the present mess, there's this amazing paradox where the government says we know more than you do, and it's just obvious they know less than everybody else does. I mean, in Vietnam, it was obvious to knowledgeable people on any university campus. All the things that McNamara rediscovered 30 years later when he made his movie and cried for us, right? And the same in Iraq. I mean, everybody that had a friend from the Middle East with any knowledge, any reflection at all, knew that the mission wasn't accomplished when Bush thought it was. These people live in an informational vacuum. They don't know it, but they do. And without the adversarial process, they're not making decisions with full information at all.
Sure. It's a bunker mentality. They have cavern fever, and they are listening. There's an echo chamber effect. You can imagine Mr. Cheney, the people he's around. He's never forced to give a press conference. He doesn't have to confront hostile witnesses. He's around people who agree with him. They're constantly telling him he's right. And this is the consequence of that is exactly an autistic government. That's the one, which is the one we have. The corrections and the mid-course corrections that you expect of a rational government haven't occurred because our government is using secrecy and fear, terrorism, as a reason for not exposing itself to scrutiny and questioning.
You know, you say you can imagine Cheney. I do imagine Cheney. I wake up every night screaming after dreaming about Cheney and his bunker mentality. This is Philosophy Talk. You can call us at 415-841-4134. That's 415-841-4134. And we're talking about liberty versus security.
Yeah, now, look, I want to ask you, but let's speak for the... I'll play devil's advocate, or maybe Ken's advocate. I don't know. Let's get
Just be Bush's advocate. That's bad enough.
You guys both say, well, the government's acting without full information. But here's the thing I think the people in the government often think, that the public doesn't have the cojones for tough decisions. Orwell used to talk about this. Look, the public, hard things have to be done. Hard choices have to be put. You put the hard choices, hard things to the people, and they'll take the easy course all the time. And so politicians often think they have to stage manage us into the hard choices that they make. They know they make them without our input. That's because if they gave us input, we'd always shirk. We'd never say, okay, go to war. Okay, raise taxes. Okay, we never do that. We never do the hard things until an absolute crisis hits.
But it may be the opposite, which is that a government, instead of choosing things that would actually help us be more secure, like hiring more people who speak Arabic, they do something that doesn't actually make us more secure, like torture people who randomly fall into their custody in order to show that they're tough, so that the policy boils down to a display of cojones. And the display of cojones may actually not be the thing that deals with the problem. That's what we want to know. It could be in some circumstances. I mean, I'm struck by the fact that our government has been most effective in getting information from terrorists. And there's a very good case in Ron Susskind's book about the Libyan terrorist Musa Kusa, who was involved with a Lockerbie air downing. They got incredibly good information from him. They didn't waterboard him. They didn't torture him. You know what they did? They took him to dinner. They wined him and dined him. They flattered him. And he gave them the names of dozens of terrorists.
They relied on that. What is it? The Stockholm effect.
This is a case where I think you can ask a person, if you, what will you sacrifice for security? Will you sacrifice your dignity in the sense of, I'm actually going to have dinner with a vicious, horrible person like this? That's a real, I think that's a sacrifice. But the assumption, which is implicit, that the way to make us secure is to use violence is, I think, obviously false. And it shows that what's on people's mind is not actually getting the result, but it's more a kind of display of power for its own sake. And I think that's we've seen a lot of that, and I think it has obviously not made us safer.
I've got two good emails. They both express views of mine that I agree with. So
that's what makes them good. Right?
The first one's pretty long, and all of it's very astute. But I'll just read the beginning. One problem I have with the overbearing emphasis on security is that most of our enemies are of our own making. I feel it would be better to examine the truth about our foreign policy and see how often the results run contrary to our better interests. For example, Iran was a Western-friendly, secular nation when we toppled its democratically elected government in 1952. That's from somebody who values his security and has a very undisclosing email name. From Roger in San Francisco, what can individual citizens do to secure their freedoms when the institutional ones, the Senate, Congress, courts, and press, safeguards fail, as seems to be the present case? Both good points, I think.
Yeah, let's. We'll take up those points in some detail after a short break. You're listening to Philosophy Talk. We're discussing liberty versus security with Stephen Holmes from the NYU School of Law.
We've been talking about managing the trade-offs between liberty and security. In our next segment, we'll look at the balance between liberty and security in the current political climate. We've done a little of that already.
Liberty versus security in the age of global terrorism. Plus more of your calls and emails, unmonitored, we hope, when Philosophy Talk continues.
Dogs run free, why not we? Across the swooping plain. My ears hear a symphony of two mules, trains, and rain. The best is always yet to come. That's what they explain to me. Just do your thing. You'll be king if dogs run free.
Bob Dylan and If Dogs Run Free, Why Not We? Taking liberties with English grammar in order to get a secure rhyme. I'm John Perry. This is Philosophy Talk, the program that questions everything
except your intelligence. I'm Ken Taylor. Today's topic, liberty versus security. Have we given up too many liberties in the so-called global war on terrorism? Or is the government correct to limit our personal and civil liberties for the sake of greater collective security?
Do you ever feel you've given up too much of one for the other, too much liberty for security, or the other way around? We'd like to hear your thoughts and experiences. Give us a call.
Join us by calling 415-841-4134. I'll say that again, 415-841-4134.
Or email us, comments at philosophytalk.org. Our guest is Stephen Holmes from the NYU School of Law.
So, Stephen, let's talk about the current political scene a little bit. The Patriot Act, the NSA wiretapping operation. Should we fear those things as a body politic, or should we welcome them, saying, yes, the government's doing right?
I think the aspect, the liberty-denying aspect of government behavior that's most worrisome is the threats to the press. The threats to, for example, use old laws, Espionage Act, against journalists who receive classified information. Because up to now, as you know, receiving classified information, publishing classified information is not a crime. And there's certain kinds of classified information, the name of agents abroad and so on. But most of the time it's not, because, of course, it contributes to the health of democracy. And the questioning of government is part of the vitality. So if the administration pushes this dimension, which is chilling the press, making the press afraid, I think that would be a major, much more than looking at somebody's library records, which is maybe annoying and so on, but really destroying the willingness of the press and the willingness of people in government, because, as you both know, the most important resistance to the administration's policies have come from leakers inside the executive branch.
Right.
Congress, as you've said, has not done a very good job at all for various reasons. So I think that's a problem.
Lawrence in Berkeley's on the line. Welcome to Philosophy Talk, Lawrence.
Yeah, hi. You're asking a false question, whether the government, how do we balance liberty or security? Because the government, the American government, is not interested in giving the American people either liberty or security. And the proof of that is in the foreign policy, that we are now We overthrew the government of Iraq, which wasn't attacking us, but we've also overthrown numerous democratic governments, such as Haiti, where we first starved the government for international funds and then sponsored an overthrow. We attempted to overthrow Venezuela. We were instrumental in overthrowing Nicaragua and, of course, Chile. And
Lawrence,
all these governments.
Lawrence, I take your point in a way, but maybe they have false beliefs about what will enhance our security. But don't you think they're acting under the guise of a belief about what will enhance our security? I mean, maybe they're doing it all wrong, but they believe they're enhancing our security, don't you think?
People do tend to believe their own propaganda, but that doesn't make it true or genuine. The point is that all of these governments, including the democratic governments that they have overthrown, sooner or later, if they succeed in repressing the people's movements and these governments, there are people in Haiti and people perhaps in Venezuela, if they succeed in overthrowing that, who are going to be coming after the United States and conducting so-called terrorist operations in the same way now that Arabs and Muslims are doing because of American policies.
Lawrence, thanks a bit. Stephen, this goes back to something. I mean, I said the government often thinks it has to stage manage us into making hard choices. And I think Lawrence thinks that the whole talk about liberty versus security is just part of their stage managing. They have some agenda, and they're just stage managing us. What do you think?
Well, what I would take from his comment is slightly different, which is historically the American electorate has not had strong oversight over American behavior abroad, particularly covert action abroad. Almost none. It comes out years later that we were overthrowing the governments of Iran and Guatemala and so forth. And by the time it becomes public knowledge, it's already a done deed. And so there's almost no democratic accountability in this area. And what's characteristic of globalization is that things we do, our covert government does on the other side of the world, can come back to bite us. So I think that is a very profound point, that the real threat, the reason we are insecure is because of the global, it's not just because of the government's behavior or because of terrorists. It's because of the global communication network, transportation network, petrodollars that we're pouring into unstable parts of the world, the nuclear weapons and other weapons we have created. That is, the modern world has made us vulnerable in a way that even if we got rid of every jihadist in the world, there would be another lunatic group who could take advantage of these things. And violence on the periphery, which was once far away from the United States, was once not a direct threat to our security, now is.
Yeah.
So that really is a challenge to our form of government, because up to now, as the caller said, the behavior, the covert actions of our government on the other side of the world have not even come to the attention of the American electorate that is now being physically, existentially threatened by the backlash of these actions.
I think Lawrence makes a very good point, but I would like to make a distinction with respect to skeptics about the government. You can say that, when the government does something that turns out to have been ill-advised and to screw things up, you can suspect either their kind of motives, what were they trying to do, or their beliefs. Why were they so ignorant? And I must admit, I tend to think our government's problems is not with motives. I don't think many of our presidents have been too venal or wanted to be tyrants, but with their beliefs. They usually have this belief that we can control the world and that we know best. That's wrong. But if you agree with me, if you disagree with me, if you want to comment, give us a call, 415-841-4134. That's 415-841-4134. And we've had quite a bit of bush bashing. Doesn't someone want to defend the president here?
Yeah, there you go. But look, I want to put a question. I like this exchange that you and John and Lawrence just have. But it makes me think that maybe the world and the structure of the world has made our old-fashioned liberties quaint. And there was a survey done after 9/11 of what would people be willing to give up. And they found lots of people across all kinds of demographic groups and education levels willing to give up a lot of liberty for security because people felt newly vulnerable. I mean, if the world is rushing in at us, maybe our old-fashioned liberties are just kind of quaint. What do you think, Stephen?
Surely the right to bear arms got a little quaint when somebody invented the submachine gun, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Well, one funny poll was taken in the States, I think about 5 or 6 years ago. When do you feel most free? And nobody said when I'm reading the newspaper or when I'm voting. They said when I get in my car. And they might have said when I get in my SUV, to bring us back to the question of what we're doing abroad and what we're doing in the Middle East. So how much of the liberty that is referred to, my freedom to drive my large car in my large highways and have gas at relatively low prices, is making me willing to do the kind of things that we see are happening, and the kind of policies the United States has been pursuing in the Middle East since World War II, of course. I don't know. I think that's another aspect of this that we haven't talked about, and I agree with your earlier point that you don't want to simply impugn the motives. I think governments, like all the rest of us, have unstable motives and incoherent beliefs. First of all, that's why we're not rational, and you've never met a rational person, and if you look at your own life,
let me try this another way. I'm still not sure. I know. So, take Americans and how we live. We consume the world's resources. We get those resources from abroad. We really don't want to pay the real cost of them. We don't want to pay the cost of the externalities generated by this consumption of oil that pollutes the environment. We don't want to cut back. We are the big kahuna. It's not just our government, it's us. We have this massive impact on the world. And people start to resent us, right?
Yeah, they do.
Now,
and we don't even notice.
Can we exist in the world, right? The resentment is a real backlash to our life in the world. Can we exist in the world being free and all that and no holds barred liberty, given the way the world's reacting to our way of life? It seems to me maybe not, and maybe the willingness to sacrifice liberty for security is some kind of recognition, maybe misguided recognition, of the fact that we can't be in the world.
Maybe if we could foist the world's anger off on the Chinese, who are going to be even bigger consumers, we can slip through this problem.
Rechannel. Just one little point here, which is that I think our loss of liberties for security pales before the fact that tens of thousands of Iraqis who never harmed a single American have died because of our behavior. Now, that's something that should be on our conscience and doesn't seem to be for some reason. So if you're talking about the real sacrifice that's going on here, yes, maybe my library card is looked at and so on, and then there are a few individuals who are rounded up. But the thing that we have done, for which there is no accountability, is this war in which the deaths of people who had nothing to do with 9/11, had never harmed an American, and they're now dead, wounded, mutilated, whatever.
Yeah, even George Bush was willing to say probably at least 30,000 Iraqis died. That was 6 months ago, and he was probably off by a factor of 2 or 3.
John in San Francisco.
That's an enormous cost.
John in San Francisco is on the line. Welcome to Philosophy Talk, John.
Hello. Thanks for taking my call. I think there's a common misunderstanding about the purpose of democracy, and I would argue that the Founding Fathers really did not intend to empower the common person, but rather to prevent power from accumulating in a few people at the top.
Well, John, I think you have a point. Stephen, you want to respond to that last remark or make any last closing thoughts?
There's a lot of ways to think about this, but of course there is a lot to that. On the other hand, the Founding Fathers very much wanted accountability to be centered in some place, so you would know who made the decision, and if it was wrong, to make that person responsible and pay a price for having made such a disastrous decision. So power must be diffused in some extent, but also concentrated in order to make accountable government possible.
Stephen, on that note, I'm going to have to say goodbye to you. It's been a pleasure having you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Our guest has been Stephen Holmes, Research Director at the Center on Law and Security at the NYU School of Law, co-author of The Cost of Rights, Why Liberty Depends on Taxes.
We want to thank all the callers we didn't get a chance to talk to, and we got several excellent emails we didn't get around to reading, as well as a couple we did. So thanks to everyone.
So you feeling more free, more secure today?
No, this topic I find rather depressing. I mean, as an American, you have to pat yourself on the back, or at least pat our country on the back for what we've got. We do have some great newspapers that try their best. We do have at least public television news is still worth watching. We have the Colbert Report. We have The guy on MSNBC.
You're leaving out
isn't
philosophy
bad.
talk, man. We
got philosophy talk. We have quite a bit of liberty compared to what most people have had over the time. But when you see all the harm we're doing because of ignorance, that good Congress should have nipped in the bud 5 years ago, it makes me depressed.
Yeah, well, it is a depressing. I find it a depressing topic too, because when I think about this, I actually think that. We love democracy in the abstract. We love our liberty in the abstract. But when push comes to shove, I don't think our love for liberty goes as deep as we pretend it does. And I also think our way of life in the world is one of the things that is causing us to feel insecure. Our way of life in the world is unsustainable, and all this backlash coming at us makes us do crazy things. But the answer isn't to give up our liberty. It's to change the way we are in the world.
What the world needs to do is put philosophy to work for it. And you can put philosophy to work on the problems that face your life. Click on Submit a Conundrum on our website.
And if you want to continue this conversation, it continues on our blog, theblog.philosophytalk.org, where our motto is Cogito Ergo Blogo, I think, therefore our blog.
And finally, you can download podcasts of our program from our website as well. And as we like to do around here, we'll give the last word on the subject of liberty versus security to Ian Scholes, the 60-second philosopher.
Ian Scholes. In one of the talk shows recently, a caller said that if it helped win the war on terror, she would be willing to fly naked. I don't know. In my opinion, toothpaste confiscation has already crossed the line. But then again, I was muttering under my breath when they started making us take off our shoes. But if it ever does come to compulsory passenger nudity at airports, and when the security cam footage shows up on YouTube for our neighbors to laugh at and terrorists to gloat over, I will ask myself the question, what would Isaiah Berlin do? Well, nothing, of course. He died in 1998 in his late 80s. But back in the 50s and 60s, he gave some thought to the notion of liberty. It all tied into pluralism, a reaction to what he called the Platonic ideal. The idea that there's only one true answer to any question, that all true answers, once they are found, will form a harmonious whole in a coherent universe. No, said Berlin, there are many genuine values, and often they conflict with each other. Mercy conflicts with justice, morality with art, for example. That's life. There is no answer, just conflict resolution. That's why liberty was so important to him. If the world is full of nations and individuals with conflicting values, and there's no time-tested proven procedure for resolving value conflicts, that is a strong argument against the restriction of liberty to impose a solution by force. For him, there were two liberties: negative liberty, that is freedom to act without obstacles, and positive liberty, your individual freedom to act, to fulfill yourself. And as far as he was concerned, for liberty to work, each individual had to know what he wanted, nobody else. He didn't have much truck with those who believe that freedom only comes with the subservience of the self to a group or greater good. That leads to totalitarianism, in his view. So what would Isaiah Berlin do in this era of restricted liberties? Well, he probably would have shucked his duds and gone through the X-ray with a shrug like a good citizen. Would have written a great essay about the experience, though. As for the rest of us, maybe we should remember something else he once wrote as we strip for the amazement of posterity. Freedom for the pike means death to the minnows. I gotta go.
That was Ian Scholes, digging deep, digging fast, the 60-second philosopher. Philosophy Talk is a presentation of Ben Manila Productions and the trustees of Leland Stanford Junior University.
Our executive producer is David Demarest.
We owe special thanks to Devin Strolovich, Neil Van Leeuwen, Ben Timpson, and Alan Farley. Our senior consulting producer is Gordon Earl.
Support for Philosophy Talk comes from various groups at Stanford University, including the Stanford Humanities Center, the Office of the Dean of Research, the Dean of Humanities and Sciences, and the Provost and President.
Also, from the Friends of Philosophy Talk, the members of KALW, local public radio San Francisco, where our program originates.
The views expressed or misexpressed in this program do not necessarily represent the opinions of Stanford University or of our funders.
The conversation continues on our website, www.philosophytalk.org. I'm John Perry.
And I'm Ken Taylor. Thank you for listening.
And thank you for thinking.